What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine. And this is where I mentioned that I completely forgot to introduce my guest, Ryan from Worst Reviews. We're going to be hearing from him in just a moment. Sorry for not adding that in. So the time has finally come to talk about X-Men Origins Wolverine, one that is known as probably the worst film in the X-Men live action series. And I was trying to think, is this the worst one? I haven't completed my rewatch of the series as I am going through them to do these videos, but yeah, from my memory, this is the worst one. And I remember most of these films pretty well. I've seen most of them multiple times, but you know, I'm giving this one the benefit of the doubt that I haven't yet revisited the other ones just yet, but I know it does not get any worse than this moving forward, really. And yeah, this movie is such a disappointment. A funny story right off the top was that I was dating a girl, I won't mention her name here, when this movie came out, and we saw the movie together. And after the movie, I realized that she was not the comic book fan that she had made herself out to be. When she was initially kind of trying to make friends with me early in the day when I didn't know her, she made it a point to like tell me that she was a huge comic book fan, really deep into the lore and knew what was going on. And when we watched this movie, listen, I'm not like a gatekeeper fan. I don't need somebody to be a fan of Marvel or the comics and know everything. But it was so clear to me that she didn't know what she was talking about, because we walked out of this movie and she instantly goes, "That was so accurate to the comics." And as you can imagine, I couldn't help but laugh, and I had to call her out on it in the moment. We're no longer together, and many years have passed, obviously, because this movie came out in 2009, and yeah, Hugh Jackman once again reprising his role as the legendary character Wolverine, Logan, and this is the first of the prequels in this entire series, and the first solo Wolverine film. And yeah, you know, I remember going into this movie and being hyped, and I will say that when I was younger I enjoyed it a little bit more than I do now, but ultimately I think even back then I knew that this movie was just a big pile of insanity. It really is. That's the best way to describe it. This movie is literally all over the place from beginning to end, and ultimately just kind of feels like a mishmash of multiple movies that just kind of felt like something that they were trying to like say, like, here's this character, here's that character, you might know this character, and try to tell a story with that. There are some interesting elements here, but ultimately I find that the overall movie is just messy, and it messes with the timeline. And even though there were some inconsistencies with certain things and characters in the first 3 X-Men films, this movie definitely is the first time that you can tell 110% that they did not care about the consistency or any sort of actual consistent timeline in these movies. This film is directed by Gavin, who's also directed things like Ender's Game, Official Secrets, and Eye in the Sky. The writers of this film are David Benioff and Skip Woods, and like I mentioned, you got Hugh Jackman. Then you also have Liev Schreiber in this film as Victor Creed, also known as Sabretooth, Danny Houston in this film as Stryker, you have Lynn Collins as Kayla, and then you have an onslaught of other people in this film like Ryan Reynolds, Will.I.Am, Kevin Durant, Dominic Monaghan, as well as people like Taylor Kitsch. And yeah, the basic premise of this movie is to show us how Wolverine came to be Wolverine, how Logan comes to have the adamantium in his body, coating his entire skeleton and making him the titular character that we are familiar with. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, the timeline and all that stuff right out the window, and the best way to really just lean into that from the very beginning is the beginning of this movie, where we find out that Logan and Sabretooth are brothers, or at least half brothers. And right out of the gate, that's just inconsistent, number one, with the comics, because that's not the case, and also it's inconsistent with the appearance of Sabretooth in the first X-Men film. In that movie, they don't have a connection. This Sabretooth is nothing like that Sabretooth. They're completely different characters. They're played by completely different actors, and ultimately they add on a whole story that honestly just completely undercuts anything that happens with those two characters in the original X-Men film, because they don't have a connection at all. They don't know each other in that movie. So why did they do that with this one? With that said though, I think the best part about this movie for me, honestly, is the fact that you have the relationship between Logan and Victor in this film. Without a doubt, that is the best part of the film, this brotherhood and this very kind of tense family relationship between these two characters. After the opening scene, I was all in, to be completely utterly honest, even though that did not go with the comics and it was in no way, shape, or form consistent with the first film. When you go into this movie and you see that opening scene and it leads into the opening credits where we see these characters going through the various wars that they've been able to survive and fight together, honestly, I think it sets it up to be a really badass movie, and ultimately I was super engaged on that level. But yeah, I think this movie after that just has too many characters and too many things that it's trying to do, and really would have, been better off focusing on how he just became Wolverine, how he became the character with adamantium inside of his body. I don't think it was necessary to add this whole brother storyline with Sabretooth, though it is my favorite part of the movie. I feel like, again, the inconsistencies with the other films, I just can't look past it. But if I looked at this movie just on its own, I would say that the brother relationship between the two is definitely the most entertaining part of the film. But even with that, it ends up kind of getting sidelined because there's so many characters and so many different things going on, and the characters are constantly having to go from various locations to locations. There's some time skips, and ultimately by the time the movie was over, it tells a story that you can follow from beginning to end. I don't think this is an incoherent story, but ultimately it just doesn't really have a whole lot of character development. It feels like something that's more about the Easter eggs, and I found that the special effects are way weaker in this film than any of the other films had come right before it. Now, obviously, there's so much more to touch on in this movie that I've yet to touch on, but let's go ahead and hear what my buddy Ryan from Worst Reviews had to say about this.
Hey, what's up guys? This is Worse, and I'm back again with another collab with my friend Anthony A. Perez here on his channel. Thank you for having me. This is my second collab. My first collab was with, I did a review with my buddy Trav from Trav Tries. We did a review of Phantom of the Megaplex. That was great. Anyway, I'm doing, unfortunately, I'm doing X-Men X-Men Origins Wolverine, and whenever Anthony came to me with this movie, it was not gonna be, I don't know, I wasn't excited to read this. Meant I had to rewatch this movie, which I have not watched it, or had not watched it since theaters. For good reason, because I never wanted to see it again. It's just a movie where so much happens, but nothing happens. Like, it's one of the few movies that I've ever seen. It's one of those few where I can literally say it has no reason for existing. The effects are subpar, to say the least. The direction, it really is a movie with no direction. I'd almost say, like, mostly, I mean, what this movie had going for it was Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, but unfortunately the performance is bland, stiff, lifeless, and that's basically everyone in this movie. There's some mildly entertaining character moments, I guess, but at the same time, the movie is too short for what it's trying to do. It's mercifully short, thankfully. But for what it was trying to do, it was trying to do too much for the runtime, which usually makes for a forgettable film if you're doing that anyway. But this is what I noticed. This is what I noticed watching the movie. Like, the writing is screenwriting 101. Like, there's not much substance, if any substance, to this movie. It's literally cliches after cliches after cliches, and it's stupid. In my much worse podcast, I did a superhero list, and I put this at like number, let's just say I put it one notch above Hulk, which is not a compliment. Like, I mean, this movie is bad, y'all. Like, it is not, I mean, it is not worth your time. My favorite X-Men movie is Logan. So, I mean, this, like, going from Logan and, like, loving Logan and then seeing this again is just embarrassing. This movie makes the Wolverine look freaking like one of the best movies ever made. I don't know, man. Alright, guys, just one more thing about this movie that I gotta say my piece on. Like, hot take, I don't know, but, like, I think the best stuff about it was the Deadpool stuff. Like, and I know everyone has said their piece about, man, this movie ruined Deadpool, and then Deadpool comes back and it's Ryan Reynolds does it right, like, now and all that. Like, I get it. I don't know, the Deadpool stuff about this movie is probably the most entertaining it gets. Like, I don't know, like, because but then again, I don't know, it's freaking stupid, it's awful, I don't know, but like, if you're looking for a late 2000s just mindless romp, I guess this is gonna be your thing, but I personally don't even think it's like so bad, it's good. But anyway, guys, that's just my quick thoughts. I don't have much to say about this movie. It's a nothing movie, but not even mildly entertaining to me. But anyway, guys, and yeah, is it the, I don't know. And one thing about it, is it the worst X-Men movie? I don't know. I mean, X-Men movies get really bad. But I don't know. This one, I don't know. But anyway, guys, have an awesome week, and I'll throw you all back to Anthony.
A big thanks to Ryan for being here in this video. Sorry, my friend, that you had to be the poor soul to watch this movie, but I knew you'd give me a good review, and I loved hearing your thoughts on it. And let's go ahead and just, rip the band-aid off, because I can't believe that you said that the most entertaining parts of this film are the Deadpool stuff. I genuinely could not disagree more, but that's the beauty of having guests on for the collab reviews, is the fact that you never really know what somebody's gonna like or not like. If maybe you like the movie and they don't like it, maybe they end up liking it more than you thought they would, or they like different things from the movie than you actually like. And so in the case of this one, yeah, I am so glad, honestly, that this exists, because it makes the existence of the current Deadpool movies that we have, and just what Ryan Reynolds has kind of been able to do with recreating the role and making it far more, in line with the comics. I think it honestly is just such a funny part of the storyline of these characters at this point. With that said, yeah, even back then, I was completely and utterly disappointed when I saw this movie and saw what they did with Deadpool. I don't understand. I just, as you can tell, I don't even know what to say here. The fact that they took the merc with the mouth and took away his mouth, I mean, it's just weird, because there's nothing about this character that is anything like Deadpool over the course of the film, other than the first portion of the film where he never has his mask on. And you definitely can get that Deadpool vibe. There are some cool moments in the earlier part when he is a little bit more Deadpool-y, but then there's also that post-credit scene that kind of has him doing the fourth wall breaking, but he hadn't done any of that in the film up to that point. Yeah, overall, I think it goes without saying that the Deadpool element of this film is definitely weak. But again, it's tough for me now, because it's become such a funny thing when it comes to comic book movies, and it's something that I feel like would never happen again to a character, in terms of like full-on disrespecting and completely changing the character and taking like ridiculous liberties with the character. So I kind of love that it exists on that level and is able to be something that we can poke fun at all these years later in things like the actual Deadpool films that obviously honor the character and are more in line with what we know of the character. Beyond that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, Taylor Kitchen here as Gambit, who later on we find out that Channing Tatum is actually going to play the role in a movie, and then that never happened, which Channing Tatum actually came out not too long ago actually saying that, it kind of broke him when he was obviously getting ready to do the role. He did a lot of preparation, he was really ready for it, and he struggled to watch Marvel films afterwards because they kind of just dropped his project. And now this year he's kind of had a return back to film with things like Dog as well as The Lost City, and I hope that he gets a chance to play Gambit one day in the future. I hope the MCU will give him that avenue, because ultimately I think he's a really good actor, and his passion for it, and especially when he was at literally at Comic-Con, I think, taking a picture with the entire X-Men cast, and then ultimately his character just never actually came to fruition. I think it's a damn shame. But yeah, Gambit is one of those things in this film, like many other characters like the Blob, who are just in this movie for the sake of being in this movie. Deadpool's another one. I believe Emma Frost is in this film as well. You also have Scott in here, Scott Summers, the character of Cyclops. He's in this movie, but ultimately he doesn't really serve much of a purpose to the story, and it's completely inconsistent with what we'd see them do with the younger version of Scott in just a few movies later, and I believe it was Apocalypse. And yeah, overall, I find that these movies just at this point just completely go off the rails when it comes to consistency in its timeline, or things that make sense when it comes to just the overall story that we've already seen play out up to this point. In this movie in and of itself, I just find myself really struggling with how I feel overall. There's a lot of characters and a lot of cool elements that I do enjoy about this film. I do enjoy, again, the relationship between Victor and Logan in this film, and I think that is the most compelling part of the movie, their brotherhood. But since we never see this iteration of Sabretooth ever reappear later on, and pretty much the events of this film have been completely and utterly dropped moving forward, you know, it's tough because it's like, what is the real purpose of having made this movie if you weren't going to do anything with anything that comes in the future? You know what I mean? Things like the Wolverine and Logan, and never really touch on anything that happened in this film, other than the fact that we already knew that Logan had undergone something that gave him adamantium, you know, over his skeletons. We already knew that from the first 3 films, so we didn't need this movie, and it didn't really give us anything that really had any sort of value moving forward. The action is big and over the top, but it almost looks cheesy compared to the big over the top action we had seen in the 3 films prior. And like I mentioned earlier, the special effects in this film, unfortunately, are pretty weak in comparison. There's a scene in a bathroom where Logan is checking out his claws, and the CG on the claws is just so bad. And literally just in the films prior, it was an actual practical effect a lot of times when he did pull out the claws. And even the claws that were CG in those films looked substantially better than the claws here. I honestly don't know what happened with this film, because there's a lot about it that I do enjoy in concept. Again, that opening, it just kind of sets up for a really epic movie. Like the opening leading up to the title card is awesome. I find that to be really awesome. And if they would have, you know, done more with Liev Schreiber as the character, maybe it would have given, you know, Sabretooth's kind of retcon in the story a little bit more validity, or, you know, some sort of validation in general. But overall, I just find it to be kind of pointless ultimately, because nothing from this movie is really touched on ever moving forward. So even what's good about this movie, really at the end of the day, doesn't matter at all, because this is going to be the last time we talk about it unless I decide to reference this movie again. So a big thanks to my buddy Ryan from Worst Reviews for joining me here in this video. Always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love. Let him know I sent you. But for now, a big thanks to you guys for watching. Please leave your thoughts down below. Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Can't wait to hear what people have to say about this one. And please do hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.